Hey everybody! This was a great episode this week, filled with the kind of stuff that made me like Season 2 as much as I do. And I think the best place to start this week is at the end of the episode with Rick banishing Carol. I know it's unusual for me to start at the end, but you'll kind of see why I am. There's so many different factors in play with Carol's banishment that it's hard to pick one to start with. But let's start with the fact that it comes down to a choice of bringing her back to the prison or sending her on her way. And the thing is, there's no good answer to which was right, because it's true that if Rick had brought Carol back, Tyrese would have probably ended up starting a confrontation, one way or another. The only way to avoid that would be to lie to the entire group that he doesn't know that Carol is the one who killed Karen and David. Now, omission is a form of lying, but it's more important that the lie would never hold up. It would hold up for a while, sure, but sooner or later, more than likely sooner, Tyrese would get on Rick's case again about figuring out who killed Karen and David. He's not going to be willing to let that go. That's part of his character. That's the fault of his character. So, Tyrese would start asking around again, and then he would be more upset that Rick lied through omission, and that would be an even bigger issue than if Rick just came back and told them all that Carol had done it, and assuming he brought her back with him in the scenario. So with that out of the way, let's concentrate on the scenario of Rick bringing Carol back to the prison and letting it be known that she's the one who killed Karen and David. Now, obviously that would upset Tyrese, but there's other things to keep in mind. Those mainly being if the other people at the prison are going to accept Carol's decision. Let's just focus on Daryl for a moment. Would he be understanding and accepting of Carol making that kind of decision, specifically without confronting the council with it first, or at least him, or at least somebody else? She killed those two people on her own. Now, whether it's the right decision or the wrong one is something we're going to come back to. What's important right now is if Daryl or others would accept that, and it's not likely that they would. If Daryl or somebody else found out that she killed those two people, they would probably want her removed. They may even consider her a threat and want to kill her as well. And if somebody tried to stop Tyrese from killing her, what would be thought of them? If, let's say, Rick got in the way and demanded that Tyrese not kill her, because Tyrese probably would try to kill her, then what are they going to think of Rick, or of anyone else who gets in his way? The person's going to be protecting a murderer? That isn't going to sit well. And there's also the fact that Carol said to Rick that she could handle Tyrese. And I don't know about all of you, but I believe her. Especially if Rick decided that he was going to bring her back and tell the group, which is the best decision as we've covered, they might get back to the prison and Carol kill Tyrese before Rick even has a chance. She needs to protect herself. Number one, numero uno, that's who she cares about. And in a way, she's right. But to do that, she would have to take out Tyrese. He is the number one threat at the prison for her. And just killing Tyrese, or if anyone else dies, is going to be quite bad for the atmosphere at the prison. It's going to break up the group even further. Not that it's all that broken, but it's going to start breaking if more and more people keep getting killed. But hold on. I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. I'm not exactly on Team Banish, because now we need to cover the fact of if banishing Carol is the right decision. And I'm not sure it is. She's not wrong when she says that she did what she did to protect herself, to protect the prison, that she made the tough decision and that it was probably the right one. And that's something we're going to come back to momentarily, because first I want to cover the fact that Carol has respect owed to her. She has been there since the very beginning. Rick should understand that. She has fought and nearly died for her life several times. She has stood by the group and earned her place, even to be considered amongst the council. Now, what that means, in my opinion, is that Rick should show her the respect of owning up to her decisions. If she killed those two people, and she's comfortable enough, or thinks she's at least capable enough of handling Tyrese, then Rick should bring her back to the prison. That's about all there is to it. She's earned that right. Now, of course, the problem with that is then Rick is essentially either condemning her or Tyrese to death, and who knows who else. After what could be a riot breaks out when somebody kills somebody else, it is all then on Rick's shoulders. So how do you then make that decision? Probably the best answer is to banish her. But as we all know, that isn't the true reason that Rick banished her. I'm going to assume that all of that went through his head. He's a fairly intelligent guy, and he's had plenty of experience dealing with these kinds of things in the apocalypse already, mainly thanks to Shane and the governor. And that's all I could think about this entire episode, was what the governor said at the end of Season 3, that you kill or you die then you kill. More importantly, the first part, that you kill or you die. That is essentially what Carol is regurgitating, and it's what Rick saw Carl turning into, and it's what Shane kept threatening the entire second season. Every time I saw Carol explaining and heard her explaining about why she had to kill Karen and David, all I did was hear Shane say, "It ain't like it was before." And Rick, despite that you think he would, he still doesn't quite understand that. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. And it's also unfair to say that Rick doesn't understand it. He certainly understands it. He was basically there in the third season. He brought himself back, mostly thanks to Morgan, or his experience with Morgan at least. But he understands all too well what Carol is becoming. He can see the signs, and he probed her for most of the episode with questions to get her responses so that he could learn if she was truly behaving like Shane or not. And she was. She gave the Shane-type answers to just about everything Rick asked. And that brings us back to the question of whether what Carol did was correct or not. We'll never know for certain. A, we don't know if they would have lived through the influenza. B, if they hadn't, is it still the moral obligation to go ahead and kill them ahead of time, or should they have waited until they were walkers? And then C, what I consider most important, is if, even if they died and turned into walkers, they would have infected or killed other people in the prison. Carol brought up the fact that Patrick died and then overnight 12 others did, but that wasn't the same scenario. Rick didn't call her on it, but he may have known it. Patrick died in the middle of a shower and was able to get to other people because he had free access. Karen and David were in a cell. They could have easily had the door locked, and they may have had the door locked, so that even if they turned into walkers, they wouldn't be free roaming around. Now, even if that's the case, they would still have the virus, obviously, so that may have helped spread the infection, but we don't know if being an infected walker helps spread the infection faster. We don't know. That's one of the many pieces of information that we don't have. And I'll be honest, that's one of the things that's great about this season, that there's so much we don't know. So in answer to the question of, is what Carol did right or wrong, we're not certain. What's important is that it's what Carol thought was right. And while that seems good on its own level, you have to keep in mind that what Shane thought was right was to kill Rick and to weed out all weak members and to take his family and to be a monster, essentially. Rick can see those kinds of qualities in Carol, and he's already dealt with this before. He's had to deal with it with the governor even as well. Carol has essentially put Rick in the most difficult position, because while he's voted himself out for being the leader temporarily, he truly is the leader of that group, no matter what anyone says. Daryl knows it. Daryl's basically said it earlier in the season already. So Rick had to make the hard decision, and when he didn't make the decision in the past, Shane nearly killed him. Alright, let's move on from that and bring up another thing I'm worried about, and that is the little girl, Lizzie. I don't trust her at all. I'm still somewhat certain that she's the one feeding the rats to the fence, and even if it's not her, she has a weird zombie obsession. She has a knife in the quarantine zone, and I'm willing to bet that Carol's training of her is going to end up in more death. That Lizzie is going to kill people that she either thinks are a threat, or she thinks are going to turn into walkers, or something along those lines. And that's of course terrifying, because Sasha, Herschel, and Glenn are all in there. Sasha and Glenn are already horribly weak from the sickness, and Herschel is an elderly man who is likely more susceptible to the virus. If Lizzie gets wind of that, she may go after him. And on top of that, the prison is nearly unguarded. There's Maggie and there's Carl. Carl's technically in quarantine as well, so Maggie's guarding the place alone. Now, I assume there's some other people who can help her. I know the group there isn't that small. It's not as small as they're quite making it seem. But still, it's really only her that's left to protect them. I'm not saying she can't do the job, but I'm saying if the governor comes back with a group or something along those lines, she's in trouble. As far as what went on with the group of Daryl, Michonne, Tyrese, and Bob, there's not a whole lot I want to talk about. Because what Michonne was saying about chasing after the governor and all that, and how she doesn't even know why she's still doing it, because she's not even angry, I want to see where that unfolds before I really comment. I do want to say that I think there's a parallel in that she doesn't even know why she's going to hunt him, yet she still is, and she says it's because it's the right thing to do, not because she's angry. That sort of speaks to the fact of what the governor said, that you kill or you die. She knows that a person like the governor has to be eliminated, or else other people are going to get killed. And even though that's not why she's doing it, it does still correlate with what she's doing. I want to give Tyrese more credit than I think a lot of people in this show are going to do, and it's because of how they're revealing his character. They show him as sort of a loose cannon, a firecracker that can't be trusted, blah blah blah. I don't quite buy that. I think Tyrese is doing what he's doing, his aggressive behavior and overacting with the zombies and all that, because he feels powerless. His sister's in quarantine with the virus already. His girlfriend and another guy died and he wants revenge for that. He just can't figure out what to do, and there's no way to do anything even if he could figure out what to do. All he's been able to do is just react with aggression and violence, because that's all he's got right now. In this new world, unfortunately for him, all he is muscle and violence. And I don't think he wants to be that. We may never know what he was in the previous world, but something tells me he wasn't just a jock guy going around beating people up. Something tells me he was a thinker, a speaker, that he used his mind and his heart to solve problems. And it's just not going to work anymore. And so because he doesn't know what to do, he's behaving the way he is. Like I said, I want to give Tyrese more credit. Alright, now, that only leaves Bob. Bob's an interesting character who, up until this episode, which I know there's only been 3, but up until this episode, I was hoping would be more likable than he is. Even with the possibility of him being a Governor Plant and the alcohol addiction, I still had higher hopes for him, or better feelings for him, up until the point when his bag opened. Because liking the booze, that's one thing. Wanting to drink it alone after everyone else has gone to sleep, that's one thing as well. Neither of those are that threatening in my opinion. Neither of those are, especially in the zombie apocalypse, the kind of thing that makes a character unlikable or not worthy, or what have you. Even though you're supposed to be part of a group, you do still have to look out for yourself. And if what you need is some alcohol to keep you going, to keep you motivated, to help the group, then so be it. Even if it's a farce, which alcoholism would be, obviously it's a farce, we all know that, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing, or that it's at least such a bad thing that it means Bob should be punished. Where Bob went wrong is that he didn't have any medication in his bag. He had an entire bag that was nearly empty because all he thought about putting into it was the one booze bottle. There was plenty of room in that bag for the booze and medication. If I were in that situation, let's just say in Daryl's place, if I had found out he had had both, I would not have judged him nearly as much. In fact, I would have probably not said anything else about it and just had my group move on. But Bob didn't do that. Bob was so far in his own world that what he said to Daryl earlier in the episode remained true, and that he only went out for himself. He only went out to get booze. He had zero concern for the group, which is probably part of the reason, that Daryl is so pissed. First, he brought Bob in and Bob has clearly been a mistake. Bob threatened him with a gun, which we all knew Bob wasn't serious about, so Daryl got in his face to prove it to him, to prove that Bob was weak. His weakness was already shown in his alcoholism, but Daryl shoved it in his face. What I want to know is if Michonne knew that Bob only had the booze bottle or not. We saw her clearly spying on him, and she's an extremely observant person. She must have known if Bob hadn't grabbed any medication or not. So was she trying to cover up for Bob for some reason or another? I wonder. And that will bring us back to the end of the episode, and we have to wonder what's going to happen when Rick tells everybody else that Carol has been banished. If he tells them. If Rick ends up telling them a lie, then that'll be an entirely different reaction. And I don't want to put a lie beneath Rick. He has lied to the group before. Towards the end of Season 3, he lied about what the governor said to him and about what he was doing with Michonne. So, lying to the entire group is not beneath Rick. So let's operate on the scenario that Rick tells them the truth. I'm not even sure who's going to react and how they're going to react. Some people aren't going to care. Some people, like Daryl, are probably going to care quite a bit. I remember reading a Facebook post that something was going to split the group inevitably in this season, and this could be the start of that ball rolling.